Okay, y'all, so as I mentioned in my email to you on Monday morning, this morning, some of the argument questions, the prompts don't always say outright. They don't always say agree, disagree, or qualify, or sometimes they'll say defend, challenge, or qualify. Sometimes they're a little bit less straightforward than that. Ultimately, you're still doing the same thing, but it's not always that clear in the prompt. So that's the kind of prompt that we're going to be looking at next, are the prompts that don't say that and kind of have a slightly more complicated way of reading them. So the first one that we're going to look at is from 2013. So I'm going to be breaking down this prompt for you, and then you are going to be coming up with examples and ideas to respond to the prompt. Remember that you want to come up with 5 to 10 specific examples of like people or things or instances. You can use history, you can use current events, you can use anecdotes, in other words, like personal experience. Try to avoid hypotheticals and try to avoid plots of movies or TV shows or that kind of thing. So I'm going to go down through the prompt real quick with you. All right. So we're going to start up at the top. For centuries, prominent thinkers have pondered the relationship between ownership and the development of self or identity. So we have a relationship between ownership and the development of self-identity. Ultimately asking the question, what does it mean to own something? So we already have a question there that's indicating to us that we're probably going to be answering something along those lines, and we're looking at this idea of ownership and self, or in other words, identity. Okay, so let's keep reading. Plato argues that owning objects is detrimental to a person's character. Aristotle claims that ownership of tangible goods helps to develop moral character. 20th century philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, that is some terrible French for you, proposes that ownership extends beyond objects to include intangible things as well. In Sartre's view, please don't make fun of me, becoming proficient in some skill and knowing something thoroughly means we own it. So here we have our 3 points of view. These are going to be the points of view that you can agree or disagree with. So this is a little bit more complicated in the sense that normally we have like one position that we're dealing with. This one you actually have 3. So I'm going to break that down for you in just a second. Let me just finish up the prompt here. So it says, think about the differing views of ownership. Then write an essay in which you explain your position on the relationship between ownership and sense of self. Use appropriate evidence from your reading experience or observations to support your argument. So see how this one says, explain your position, right? It doesn't say agree, disagree with Aristotle, agree, disagree with Plato. It says for you to explain your position. So you're still kind of doing the same thing that you were doing before in the sense that you can choose to agree with Plato or to agree with Aristotle or to agree with Sartre. But you don't have to necessarily. The way that I want you to think about these kinds of prompts is sort of like a jumping off point for developing your own ideas. So first we need to break down what each of these 3 are saying. So I'm going to erase my little blue here. And we're going to kind of go through what each one is saying. And I'm going to break them down for you a little bit below. So the first one we're going to do is Plato. So I'm going to color code him in the dark blue. So Plato argues that owning objects is detrimental to a person's character. So if we don't know what the word detrimental means, it means like negative or bad. So Plato thinks that owning things makes you a worse person. Makes you, a worse person, right? The more you own, the worse you become. Now, your brain should already be kind of buzzing in the sense that we definitely can see lots of examples of this. Okay, now we have our second point of view, which is Aristotle. So Aristotle claims that ownership of tangible goods helps to develop moral character. So this is saying the opposite, right? Aristotle is saying that owning things helps you develop character. So you could think about, right, maybe one time you begged your parents or your guardians to let you get a dog. right? And through getting that dog, you become more responsible. Or when you have more money, right, you have to become more responsible, and maybe you just start to give things more to charity, right? So the idea is that the more you own, the more your character develops. So then we have our third point of view. 20th century philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre proposes that ownership, number 3, ownership extends beyond objects to include intangible things as well. In Sartre's view, becoming proficient in some skill and knowing something thoroughly means that we own it. So he's not necessarily saying, kind of like these two, they're saying that this is like good or bad, right? Or vice versa. He's just saying you can own things that are not tangible or touchable. So ownership is more than physical ownership, right? You can own a look. You can own your culture. You can own geometry. You can own all these different things that you learn, or that you just see, or that are part of you. So those are our 3 different points of view. So now when you're writing this essay and when you start to think of examples, you don't have to cover all 3 of them, all right? That would be a lot. So what you can do is kind of choose the 1 or 2 that speak most to you. So if you feel like you can come up with more examples for this one, then come up with more examples for that one. If you feel like you can come up with more examples from maybe combining these 2, then do that, right? Say, well, owning something does make you a better person. And also owning something like knowledge especially makes you a better person. Or maybe you want to say, owning skills is more beneficial than owning items because it makes you greedy. All right. Or maybe owning knowledge can be greedy and make you a worse person in some ways. So you're just kind of picking and choosing what you agree and disagree with and how you can complicate these ideas. Remember, you don't just want to say something simple like, oh, owning a bunch of money is bad because it makes you greedy, right? You have to give more specific examples, and you have to give a little bit more complexity, right? Like, why does that make you greedy? Are there any exceptions to that, right? Kind of acknowledging some counterclaims. So you're going to be coming up with your own examples. You want to try to get 5 to 10 specific examples, and you can just list those on your assignment, and you're going to turn those in, and I will give you some feedback on them. So the more you can think of, the better. So we're thinking of people, places, right? Anecdotes, right? We're looking for something specific. The more specific, the better. Alrighty? Be sure you email me with any questions.